everyone. This is just to tell you that we talk about a lot of things in this podcast and so many terms for which you understand the history. Secularism, for example, or the caste system. So, do you know where all these terms have come from? The villain of the piece, I'm sorry to say, is my subject, that is sociology. A lot of the stuff that you hear in mainstream media, the terms, terminology, understanding, all comes from Eurocentric, West centric sociology. So I am doing a course, a series of 10 classes, 10 2-hour classes, which will explain sociology to you, explain Western sociology and so many of these terms to you, and give you the Indic vision and understanding which you always wanted but didn't know where to get. So it's there in the description. Join the class. The class has already begun, but you can join at any time. Join in and learn about the roots of much of this modern woke terminology that is indiscriminately applied to India. Hope to see you in my class. Namaste. Most nations in the world do not have the word secular in their constitution. Even the Scandinavian countries, which are very, very fond of lecturing us, except Sweden, it amended its constitution, I think it was in 2000, to change this fact. Otherwise, most of this Western bloc of countries, which is so fond of lecturing us, they are not in their own constitution. They don't have this word secular. Do you know what is assumed? That if they are Christian nations, they are automatically secular. And let's take 1947, because it was around that time, maybe a year or two later, that the Constituent Assembly of India sat down to draft the constitution. And it took the weight of the word secular. It understood it like you are understanding it. And it decided that it's our duty to be the most secular nation in the world. My question, of course, is why did India find it necessary to kind of tom-tom to the world, look, we are going to be secular, we are secular, we are secular.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the WARC Indian History Podcast. I'm Utkarsh.
Namaskar, this is Sumedha. As always, ready with a sizzling new topic this time. I'm sure you're going to love today's topic. It's very controversial.
I thought last time's topic was a sizzler because we were talking about food.
Yes, indeed.
No.
We got a lot of comments on it, of course. Thankfully,
Yeah,
most of
what-
them were very appreciative. We didn't
What
get
were
any
the-
of
what
the
were-
abuse.
Not even concerning beef? Nothing?
No. One of our viewers did say, "Oh no, I love beef. This must be a Brahminical conspiracy." So I said, "No, just watch the video," because he said it before watching the video. But I think after watching it, he was very, very appreciative. He did not realize that there was Ayurveda, scientific properties of food, especially when mixed together. The depth of our traditions, the roots. So he was very, very happy to hear that. And so were many other people. They were telling us to do more detailed, laser focused programs on certain kinds of food. Maybe we can.
Yeah, I think we might. I mean, there's a bunch of things I think we want to do. One is that I personally feel there's a lot of content hidden inside each podcast, which would be great to put a spotlight on with its own individual focus or video. Maybe we'll get to it at some point in time, I'm very sure. So
We will.
today's topic, this is actually quite interesting, and I'll tell you why, and that is also going to introduce the topic to everyone listening. When I think of secularism, right, coming from my point of view, I think of it as a universal good and a value that all nations should aspire to. The definition of modernity, the definition of a values-based global
Wow.
world order.
Wow,
telling you.
that's a lot of weight to put on one little word.
Exactly, right? That's how it comes across, and I would bet a lot of people And again, it's so difficult to put a tag on what kind of person I am or what's my demographic. But a lot of people think of it that way. I was very intrigued when I spoke with you, and this was, I think, a few months ago, when you were telling me that secularism isn't necessarily all fully positive, and you need to kind of unpeel the onion a little bit and try to understand a little bit further. I think we did not have a very detailed conversation. I think I kind of reserved asking you because I wanted to have this conversation on camera. So I want to kind of start there. I want to start off firstly understanding. Remember what we did on democracy. I remembered that and most people were equating universal adult suffrage and democracy,
Yes.
which is why Greece gets this amazing thing. It had democracy 2000 years ago or whatever, whereas it didn't, right? We think of universal adult suffrage. So I want to take a similar journey for secularism. That's one thing, the modern understanding of it, a little bit of the evolution, if you have something on that. And I also want to understand how does this tie in with the Indian or the Hindu worldview or the general view of it, and how does it all come together? My impression of India historically is that it's definitely a very, very tolerant country. I mean, you had people coming, fleeing away from other empires and coming here for refuge. I mean, the Parsis are a great example, but I'm sure there are plenty of more which I'm not even mentioning.
Jews, for instance.
Jews, of course, the Jews as well. So I do want to understand what the Hindu or the Indian concept is, and how does it compare with the modern notion of secularism, what the differences are. And lastly, as you said, the elephant in the room. This is a very hot topic, particularly in the political climate in India right now. I'm not even in India, but I feel it. I understand that this is part of the narrative. Yes, I understand. I know that it is part of the narrative, so I want to get your point of view on that from the knowledge and the from where you are coming from. So feel free to start anywhere that you feel appropriate.
Today, I'm going to start with asking you a few questions, Utkarsh.
Okay, let's go for that.
So I think you always ask me a lot of questions. I answer to the best of my ability. I am a little curious, actually, genuinely curious about certain things. One is, what do you understand? What is the meaning of secularism?
It essentially means freedom for everybody to practice their faith. With the understanding that you're not impeding on the freedom of others, is how I would think of it.
But where do you get this meaning from?
It's a good question.
This is not the dictionary meaning of secular, neither is this the historical legacy meaning of secular. This is just something which is understood. And actually, secular does not mean this at all. Secular comes from, as always, since we are in a very Christian civilization, in spite of whatever we may think, this comes from the Bible. It comes from the synoptic gospel of Matthew, Luke and Mark, where it says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and render unto God what is God's. Therefore, this means the difference between the sacred regime and the earthly regime. So the secular is the earthly regime, secular is Caesar, and whatever is, yes?
Isn't that what should I say? It may be the origin and the base of it, but isn't that an antiquated understanding? Is that really how most people who think of secularism, is that what they think?
So let me tell you how we came to today's understanding, and I'll also tell you why I'm starting with this worldview or this philosophy. So this philosophy was generated by Christians because the whole sect, which later became an organized religion, came up in Roman times when the state religion was not Christianity. So they had to find a way to live in a polity which was not Christian. So then they decided that, whatever are the secular laws, we'll follow them, but we have our own sacred laws. Now, as you know, after Constantine became a Christian because of his mother Helena and turned the Roman Empire into a Christian empire, the entire polity became Christian. And then it was that the Catholic Church, which slowly developed, became more and more and more powerful, and it became both the earthly power as well as the divine power. So you see, what it was trying to do is to control both things. Earthly power and divine power. So it would tell the kings what to do. The kings who were the epitome of earthly power, they would tell the kings what to do. So,
Okay.
in about the 9th century was the apogee of this, when the Holy Roman Empire was set up, and the Pope crowned Charlemagne in 800 of the Common Era as the Holy Roman King. So, in this Holy Roman Empire, the church's writ used to run. But things change. And the church found itself to be less and less all powerful. And then that the schism came, and there were Protestants. Kings became
Yep.
more and
Yep.
more powerful. Henry the Fourth was one of the main kings who came into a lot of conflict with the church. So it was to decide, okay, what is the church going to do and what is the state going to do. That this whole idea of secular and sacred developed from the ideas of the synoptic gospel. They were put into practice. There was a fight between the Catholic Church and the kings. It was sorted in about 1122. It's called the Concordat of Worms. Now, Worms is not insects or those creepy crawlies. It's a city in Germany. So it was
Okay.
solved in a treaty between basically the church and the king, which divided powers between these two. And later in the 16th century, you had the Treaty of Westphalia, which brought into being the nation state, the Westphalian nation state, which also built on these ideas. And our current constitution, for example, or much of our polity, not society, the formal polity, is based on these ideas, Utkarsh. That is why these ideas are important. And they are also important because they don't sync or gel with the ways in which we have, around thousands of years, thought of our own polity. So therefore, while you have a point when you say who cares about the synoptic gospel and who cares about worms, etc., we cannot forget that this whole system was built, the entire structure was built to solve certain problems. Those
I
problems.
understand. So I'm trying to understand the significance of this. So I'll give you a good example, right? One conversation that we had was that if you think of uh, unbounded capitalism, which assumes that nature is a bounty for man to use, that is very different from the fundamental belief that man should be in harmony with
Absolutely.
nature. So
Absolutely.
that has an implication, right? You see crazy, just maximizing shareholder
Yeah.
capitalism right now. I understand it very clearly. What is the significance of this thing in terms of how you think of secularism?
Yes, so to answer that again, I want to question you. I want to ask
Okay.
you. I want to ask you. Suppose we did not have secularism, on which you've made it the lodestone of modern civilization almost. Suppose we didn't have secularism, what dangers would we face according to you?
I feel like I'm stepping into a trap here, but I'll go with
No,
it.
no, 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 no.
No, not like
I'm
you're going to
not.
trap. No,
No, this is a very
Okay.
good faith, genuine question because I want to solve
no.
those
I know
problems.
it is. I'm stepping into a trap in good faith, is what I think I am. So the risk of that is that you have an intolerant majority religion dominating the state,
Okay.
is what I would say.
And what will that intolerant majority religion do? I mean, let's look at practical things. What will be the
Okay,
problems?
so let's take an
people will
example,
face?
right? Let's take an example of what is, and I don't know the details of this. I have not investigated the primary sources myself, but I'm telling you my impression of it. Based on the coverage of one of your favorite journals, The Economist. So let me preface it with this.
Well.
Okay, so apparently in Tibet, right, and was it Tibet or was it certain parts of Mongolia that's occupied by China and the CCP? My apologies, I'm forgetting. Not that I'm equating the two, I'm just forgetting genuinely what
Okay.
the story was. People have their language, right? They're I think it's Mongolia, so they have the Mongol language, etc. The CCP is trying to integrate everybody to speak Mandarin, to follow the general consensus, the Xi Jinping
Utkarsh,
way.
I have to interrupt you here because you're talking about language and not religion.
Fair enough.
Tell me something
enough.
connected to religion. Well, I can tell you something, it just struck me.
Yeah, I'm sure
So,
there's plenty of examples.
yeah, during the reign of Aurangzeb, all non-Muslims had to pay a tax called jizya. So it was a tax
Yes,
on your
okay.
religion.
Yeah.
Then at the same time, the Jews had certain civil and religious disabilities in Christian civilizations. So there can be, I suppose, dangers to your income, to your wealth, to maybe following your own religious practices. So in some places, if you are not of a particular religion and do not follow the marriage system or rites of that religion, then basically you are unmarried. You can never get married according to your own religion because it's not recognized by the state. So I assume these are the things you are talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Some kind
yeah.
of large scale social, economic, cultural disabilities on a part of the population simply because the religion they follow is different. Is that the danger, or is there something else?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and so therefore you would want that there should be, you're using a word which, tolerance. Again, what does tolerance mean? That you don't like something, but well, you're trying to live with it. So I don't like this word tolerance. I reject the term religious tolerance because to me it seems condescending, it seems negative, and it basically conveys the message, I don't like you, but okay, if I have to live with you, I will force myself. So the Hindus are not tolerant, they are universally accepting. They are universally compassionate. They don't have any in and out. They are not an exclusive religion. So if I had my way, this word tolerance would be thrown out of this particular discourse because I think it's a bad word. I think in itself, the minute you say, okay, I tolerate you, it actually packs in a lot of negative feelings that you have towards me. So I would like to say universal acceptance and universal acceptance of the validity of every religious path. That is the USP of Hinduism. Now, the validity of each religious path is not accepted by Abrahamic religions. There is only one. After all, does the daily azan say? It says there is no God but Allah. And if you don't follow Allah, I mean, you have no future. So the only person that Allahu Akbar is, just says, it points out the essential, specific nature of God as Allah and nobody else. So you don't have any such thing in in the Sanatan Dharma practice. So the word tolerance does not come from the Hindu ethos. It comes from somewhere else. There's another difference.
So when we think of modern secularism, is it not the same principle of acceptance of all faiths, or does it differ from this principle?
I have my doubts, and especially since I am an Indian, and I will go into Indian examples in detail. But Utkarsh, look at other countries. For example, is Norway a secular country? Most would say yes.
I have no idea. All I know about
but
Norway
you know,
is I love their
in Norway,
metal music.
in Norway, the state gives certain money on behalf of each citizen to the church. Is that the behavior of a secular nation?
What about the US?
The
Just
US,
to make it a very specific example.
Yeah, I think of all countries, if we look at their constitution and their practice, perhaps the theory is the closest to trying to make a salad bowl of all religions in the US constitution. It is not so in other constitutions. Look at the British constitution. The British monarch is the defender of the faith. Which faith? Christianity. The British monarch is the head of the Christian church.
Again, is that so in reality today?
What do you mean by reality?
Is the British monarch today is King Charles, my apologies.
King Charles.
It's difficult to adjust. Is he playing a role to defend the Christianity?
He is the head of the Church of England.
In name, yes, but
not in name, in actual fact. The entire bureaucracy of the church depends on the king being the head of the Church of England. So it's not in name. He is actually the head. And the Church of England actually works like that.
Okay.
So I don't know what you mean by reality, unless if you mean that he does not have to take up arms and fight off the Islamic crusaders. Well, yes, that's true. That part is true. He doesn't have to do any actual fighting. But in earlier times, say when other English kings, Richard the Lionheart, for example. What did he do? He was the king of England. He went off to defend the faith against the Crusaders, against the Islamic enemies, Saladin, etc.
Of course.
So, theoretically, most nations in the world do not have the word secular in their constitution. Even the Scandinavian countries, which are very, very fond of lecturing us, except Sweden, it amended its constitution, I think it was in 2000, to change this fact. Otherwise, most of this Western bloc of countries, which is so fond of lecturing us, they are not in their own constitution. They don't have this word secular. Do you know what is assumed? That if they are Christian nations, they are automatically secular. Isn't that what is assumed? Because Norway is a Christian nation. Switzerland is, again, Switzerland was a Christian nation, but Switzerland has also very pointedly and specifically amended its constitution in the last few years.
Okay.
So, of all the countries in the world in 1947, let's take 1947 because it was around that time, maybe a year or two later, that the Constituent Assembly of India sat down to draft the constitution. And it took the weight of the word secular. It understood it like you are understanding it. And it decided that it's our duty to be the most secular nation in the world. My question, of course, is why did India find it necessary to kind of tom-tom to the world, look, we are going to be secular, we are secular, we are secular. I don't know. Do you have an answer to that? If you just cast your mind back.
I guess what you're saying is that the DNA, the fabric of the country is, if not the word secular, but the meaning of acceptance of all faiths already.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe secular was the way to translate that across to the world. I don't know. Maybe that could be the...
So it was, I think I agree quite a bit with what you're saying. It was something to show the world and also to show yourself. Now, Britain doesn't feel the need to put secular in any part of its oral constitution. For that matter, nor does Norway, nor does Canada, none of these very, very strongly secular nations which like to lecture India have actually in their constitution, they don't have these words. Because if you think a bit, you will realize that this statement is not wrong. All Christian countries are automatically understood to be secular. This is the definition as made by a kind of Eurocentric understanding of economy and polity. But a nation which was majority Hindu, how could it be secular? It couldn't be. It was not Christian, and remember, it came from that very backward, as understood at the time, very backward and unequal form of society. Hindus had the caste system. Hindus had many social evils, and because of those social evils, they were not a egalitarian society. Therefore, they had to make themselves egalitarian in some way, and they had to signal to the rest of the people. At the time, I think there were about 14-15% Muslims and 3-4% or something else. Of course, the population percentage of Muslims has gone up in the past few years, which it itself shows you that India has been a good host. Look at Pakistan, Bangladesh. The population of Hindus has fallen to almost zero. It's below 1%, and it was around 15. So that's a kind of large number, large data, which will show you the hospitality and acceptance of the nature of the Hindu polity. You know, in Hindu polity, Utkarsh, the dangers that you spoke about, social disabilities, economic disabilities, cultural disabilities to people who are not of the majority faith, simply because the majority faith imposes itself on them, this danger does not exist. This danger does not exist as we can see it in practice. It also does not exist because of the theory. What is the theory of Hindu polity and society? That there are certain desirable things that you aspire to. What are these desirable things? These are called the four Purusharths: Dharma, Arth, Kam and Moksha. And within these four, you go through the whole gamut of things on earth and things beyond earth. Dharma, dharmic civilization, is what India is. And I think it is the inability to understand the differences between dharmic civilizations and Christo-Islamic civilizations, which has led to this very peculiar focus on being holier than thou. that India has to be secular, more secular than anybody else. And therefore, what it has ended up doing is putting these disabilities actually on the majority. I'll pick up this topic later. I just want to say a few words about
Yep. Yep.
dharma and how is Indian polity and society regulated. So to have all those desirable things that you spoke of, egalitarianism, and basically, letting people live the way they want to live and exercise their profession and achieve whatever they want to achieve, dharma, arth, kam, and moksha, achieve everything. Hindu thought does not say that there is one particular way of doing it. You can do it in whichever way you like. You can reach that moksha in whichever way you like. So therefore, at the spiritual and religious level, there is nothing to say that you cannot achieve moksha or you cannot live a dharmic life if you are following Islam or following Christianity. Then there are also 4 or 5 kinds of dharma. I won't go into all of them, but 2 are important. One is Raj Dharma and one is Samanya Dharma. Raj Dharma is the role of the king, the duties of the king. What are the duties of the king? The king has to look after each and every person in his praja. Remember, each and every person in his praja, not the Hindus, or not just of his sampradaya, or of if he's a Vaishnav, then only the Vaishnavs or only shares. All of his praja. He has to look after them like children. In their welfare lies his welfare. In their happiness lies his happiness. This is Raj Dharma. So doesn't it give you basically egalitarianism and a welfare state for everyone, not just for a particular religious majority? It gives it to you for everyone. And how was the king supposed to do this? The king was taught how to be a dharmic king. There was training, there was teaching, there was advice. He was supposed to follow the advice of 3-4 people. The Purohit, that is the dharmic preceptor, was there, his guru. There was also the Senapati. There were also the older women of his family. So he was supposed to follow the advice of all these people. Then you come to the Praja, normal average people. They were also supposed to follow Samanya Dharma. Now, Samanya Dharma is not some Hindu Samanya Dharma. It is kind of, what can I say? These are very general things. For example, there's a lot that I can say about this, quoting from many sources, from the Vedic corpus and from the Dharma Sutras, etc. But I'll just tell you in general. The best description of Samanya Dharma is that which you have to follow to live a good life and to live a good life in society. This is also the contract between the individual and the social, so that everyone lives a fulfilling life. So what are these Samanya Dharma qualities? Things like courage, forbearance, self-control, no stealing, cleanliness, control over senses, discernment, self-knowledge, integrity, freedom from anger. These are explained in our Itihas and Puran also. So does this sound to you like some religious majoritarianism which is going to make for strife in society? This is what Samanya Dharma means.
I think one particular... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, in a nutshell, what I want to say is that our thinking is not that there is a religious bureaucracy which will control the spirituality of the people, such as the church, and therefore this religious bureaucracy will come into conflict with the earthly bureaucracy, and therefore we need a realm of the secular. This is just not there. For Hindus, Indians, dharma prevails, it pervades everything, absolutely everything. And in those actions, you have to look at your own dharma, that means what you have to do. And the powers that control society and regulate society have to also look at their own dharma. This is defined in such a way that everyone, no matter what sampradaya, what dharma, what religion they follow, everyone is allowed to come to the balance of dharma, arth, kam and moksha. So can you see the difference between dividing the sphere into a sacred and secular one and saying state is secular, it doesn't care what religion you follow, it doesn't care what you do, it has no concern. That was one group of the Constituent Assembly members. They were called the no concern group. So this no concern group said we don't care about your religion. You can do whatever you like. But this is not the way in which Hindu society has functioned. Because we do care. Dharma pervades every sphere, everyone. Raja has to follow Raj Dharma. Praja has to follow Praja Dharma. And if Praja is naughty, then Raja has to keep them in control.
So this is how I've understood it. The
Yes.
when you and now I'm starting to understand the difference. When you think of the word secular, it implies the basis of there is one majority, probably monotheistic, Abrahamic like faith. The faith says that you have believers and then there are non believers who are rather doomed. But you are tolerant of everybody, regardless of that, even if they're doomed or whatever. But the difference here
Yes.
is in the metaphysical, spiritual, philosophical, whatever you want to call it, belief of the Hindu or Indian or Dharma is that there is no such thing as a non-believer. There's no such thing as somebody who's not on the path. Everybody,
Yes.
regardless of their choice, is pretty much the same. You do it the way you want.
Yes.
So there is no need to
Yes.
be secular because everybody is already part of the. There's nobody who's outside of the fold. I
You
understand now a
got
little
it.
bit.
You got it. And everyone is entitled to pursue those four great aspirational things: dharma, arth, kam, and moksha in their own way. And the Raja or the state power, today it would be the government, looks after everyone, is supposed to look after everyone. And whenever there is some strife in society, as we've often discussed, there are many bad actors and many issues and problems come up. One is that society itself does some internal churning and thinking and tries to reform it, and then the king and his dand, his justice, are always there to bring things back to an even keel. So that
Okay.
is why, it's again like squaring the circle. Some things which were made for a polity and a society, which was very jealously guarding its own exclusivity, is put onto these poor people who don't know the meaning of the word exclusivity at all. Why do you think that all festivals are celebrated in India? Maybe there's more excitement around Christmas in India than there is in Switzerland, because we're happy with everything, we accept everything. That, of course, that is the USP of Hindus. It was their strength. The way modern times have changed the situation, this has become their weakness, and this is exploited heavily by not only the state but by various other bad actors and various other vested interests.
Yeah, could you elaborate on that? Because I think
For
this
instance,
yeah.
we have an accepting attitude towards everyone. Like you said, whether it was the Parsis who came and they were supposed to live in India as sugar is mixed into milk, which means it just sweetens it and it doesn't create any disturbance at all. And they've lived like that. So from there, why have we become today? There is definitely a change in the Hindu population. They are not that trusting and not that accepting. Suspicion has crept in, anger has crept in. All
Yes.
this has crept in. That's because for now, maybe now, if you sit up and take stock, for the past 300-400 years, Hindus have been exploited. Look at the way the Islamic invasion was a violent one and it forcibly converted people. That's a whole different story. But you look at India post 1947. I think it is Article 25 to 27, which gives everyone the right to freedom of religion in India, and also the freedom to propagate your religion. Now, this was fought over in the Constituent Assembly about whether or not to write propagate. Finally, it was written. So, what does that mean? That there was conversion was let loose even after 1947 on the Indian subcontinent. Now, if it is an organic thing, then nobody minds. There's some certain realization you come to. This is not the way you want to approach God, this is the way you want to approach God. Nobody has a problem with that. Unfortunately, it's not that simple because there's a lot of money and power involved in this. When Saudi Arabia, which has now changed, was in its worst phase, it spent a lot of money on spreading Wahhabi Islam, which is a very, very dangerous kind of Islam, exclusivist and violent. Spent a lot of money in India converting people to Wahhabi Islam. The Catholic Church and the different Protestant churches have been vehicles and what can I say, machines of conversion. They put a lot of money in the 21st century, I think. Very famously, I think in 2001 or something, the Pope said, let this be the Asian century when we convert, or I'm paraphrasing, when we make Asia Christian. So when there is a thrust of two huge world religions with a lot of money, there's a lot of money with Islamic countries because of petrol, there's a lot of money with Christian countries because of colonization. When all that is let loose on India, then Hindus have now started feeling that they are like, chickens wherein a wolf has been sent in to eat them up. Unfortunately, that is also one reason why the so-called tenet of secularism is not seen the way you saw it at the beginning of this conversation. You think that it brings universal good. What do many Hindus think? That it is another name for anti-Hindu minority appeasement. And this is a very, this has become a very big issue now. There is a huge argument going on about the way in which the constitution itself has written into it so many of these anti-Hindu tenets. Also, the way in which new laws are brought, which are pro the Abrahamic religions and anti the majoritarian religion. So, Utkarsh, on the face of it, it seems odd. If even today Hindus are, say, between 75 and 80% of the population, maybe a little less, why should they feel threatened? Ridiculous, isn't it? Why should they feel threatened by that 14, 18, 20% of population, which is Islamic, 5% which is Christian, and a small percentage which is Sikh? So there is an understanding of it which is in the mainstream. I wonder if you would like to talk about that. There seems to be an understanding that there is an upsurge of Hindu chauvinistic sentiment. Would you agree with that?
So I think two or three things, right? And I'll tell you parts that I understand and parts which don't necessarily sit right with me, but I don't know whether that is reality or that is propaganda. The part about the civilization repairing itself, like we talked about with the Ram Mandir, right? I
Yes.
understand a little bit better now, where I didn't earlier, right? Where I was like, okay, why is it? Because again, when you view religion from a monotheistic lens, you tend to think of things in extremes. Whereas if you look at, the history over here, it suddenly makes sense. The thing that doesn't sit right with me, and I'm going to go back to one topic from the last podcast, and I don't know whether this is propaganda, this is media outrage for the sake of it, but and whether, and it's something, especially Western outlets love to jump on, is the entire issue of beef and beef related violence, right? So, in fact, I have a couple of questions. Is that, and I don't know whether you have any numbers or whether you have, but I'm certainly sure you're more informed than me on this one. Is this a significant phenomenon? Is it really happening? Is it something that is convenient for the Western press to pick on? And if it happens, why does it happen? I don't think that fits in with the ethos of Hinduism based on what you have described.
Well, if you want to, let's talk about beef again, although we did last time. Now here, Utkarsh, things are not just social and religious, but also economic. So you know that there is a lot of cattle smuggling. The main reasons why there is a beef-related violence or any kind of conflict is because there is a huge cattle smuggling industry, especially that which goes to Bangladesh. So there are
smuggling.
Cattle smuggling
From India to Bangladesh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. India to Bangladesh, it's huge. So this cattle smuggling is of course done in ways which are inhumane, which are illegal, and which should not be done. So there is of course a resentment against this because Utkarsh, Gaur Raksha is part of the Hindu ethos. So if it is seen by a group of Hindus that this absolutely barbaric cattle trading and cattle smuggling is going on, they do try to stop it. For that matter, this cattle smuggling is not a legal operation. It is illegal, it is done under the cover of darkness, it is done by desperados. So that part I don't think you can argue against because it is completely illegal. The
I think it's a very...
let me
yes,
just say one more thing. I just want to
finish.
say one more thing, that the problem arises when it is done by self-styled vigilantes. So they decide that no, we are going to stop this and we are going to stop it by force. So then there is violence. So what ideally should be done is that it should be done through legal means. That this cattle smuggling should be stopped through legal means. Unfortunately, a lot of the time the police is also compromised. It's not possible to get legalities into play. So a lot of realities come in and the situation does get ugly. What were you saying?
No, I was saying with this entire cow beef thing, I have just realized it's for any non-Indian or non-Hindu or even non-practicing Hindu, so to speak, whatever the practice may be. I think it's a very simple mental exercise to imagine. A lot of us love dogs,
Yes,
right? I'm just giving you a
yes.
simplistic example. It's not to equate anything. I'm just trying to provide a mental technique.
Parallel.
Parallel, rather. Right? Of course, there are certain cultures where they eat dogs. In fact, they still do in certain parts. They're banning it in South Korea, for example. So that the whole idea sounds so horrific.
Yes.
It is not difficult to imagine that in different cultures,
Yes.
different animals are allocated different levels of sentimental value. It's all very random if you think about it. Right? I mean, the Hindu choice for the cow is not random. We talked about it, the products of the cow leading to the whole Vedic religion. I got
And
it.
in fact, Utkarsh, the choice of dogs is also not random. Dogs and humans have evolved and grown together. We will
Absolutely.
definitely do a podcast on dogs and humans one of these days. So that's also
So for
not really random.
It is absolutely not. So the point is that it is absolutely okay for a culture to allocate sentimental value. Now the conflict here arises that one culture has sentimental value, other culture eats this particular animal. And that's where, for the person who's not of the culture or not grown up totally immersed in the culture, it's a little bit difficult to understand. But then you just have to understand that you also have animals that most people do, unless they're psychopaths.
Yes.
Have some animals that they hold sentimental values to.
Yes.
There are plenty of them, even in India, right? Some of the videos that you see are crazy
Yeah.
of mistreatment of dogs.
Yes.
So
yes.
you just have to do that mental exercise, then you can understand, you can get it, then you can understand. And this is beyond going back to the parallel. It's not really a parallel because the status is very different, well beyond the status of a dog, so to speak. So yeah, I get it now. But it's helpful to understand about the vigilantes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
And
for me,
the
the
vigilantes will, give a bad name to this whole thing. But sometimes there is no other action but vigilante action possible. So I don't know what to say on this. The other rather sad part, Utkarsh, is that often beef is used to provoke Hindus. So you will see that this entire thing will arise because someone has thrown the head of a dead cow inside a temple, or where people of the Hindu religion live. So this is done for provocation. And this provocation is a very effective one. Because like I said, Gaur Raksha and the love for cows is inherent amongst Hindus. So it's something which is difficult to be tolerated. So over here, I think that some kind of respect for this has to be practiced by all sides. If Muslims don't eat pork, then Hindus should be sensitive to that. If Hindus don't eat
absolutely.
beef, then Muslims should be sensitive to that. And generally, Utkarsh, people rub along well enough. It is only in special cases like, people who want to provoke, who want to fight, or in cases of vigilantism, cattle smuggling, that these things come into play. And don't believe everything you read in The Economist. It's not as if India is suddenly inundated by this. One in a, blue moon case will also be tom-tommed so much that you think it's happening everywhere all the time.
Yeah. No, there are definite certain biases among certain organizations. And overall, Western press also has a certain point of view, which is very clear to see.
And over here, I would like to use the word tolerance, which I don't like to use otherwise, because I don't like anybody who eats beef, but I will tolerate it. Maybe I don't like anyone who eats pork, but I will tolerate it. I mean, when I lived in a hostel in Delhi University, I had people living next to me in those rooms who did eat dogs. I tolerated it.
Dogs.
Dogs.
Where were they from?
Dog meat. Northeast.
From where? Okay.
Northeast India. Dog meat. So I didn't like it. I tolerated it. And I mean, ideally, I would not want to live next to someone who's eating dog meat. I mean, it offends everything. It offends all my sensibilities. But I was in a hostel. So it was not, my own palace that I could do whatever I wanted to do. So obviously, I had to. This is where the word tolerate comes in. I don't like it, but I have to tolerate it. And these are the things which are the subject of toleration. But living with people who follow other ways of faith, that is not tolerance, that is acceptance.
Yeah.
So these things
So
are
that
really
makes-
thrown at Hindus, and the Western press, of course, is very tiring and shrill, and I think, I mean, it's going down the drain, its credibility at least, because it no longer, it's, some nuance, some perspective is expected from people who are great journalists, but there seems to be none. And right now, I think it is bash the Indians time in the Western press. Maybe they are threatened by the rise of India, the relative rise. We're still not where we need to be. We have a long way
Very
to
far
go.
away.
We are very far away from where we need to be. But even this tiny little bit of rise is not accepted. So perhaps there's a bit of being threatened. There's this whole question of this different civilization, which is realizing its roots and realizing that it's not another example of the Christo-Islamic Abrahamic paradigm. So all that is found to be very threatening. The Western press is, I think it's getting to be, well, intolerable. I have cut off my subscriptions to the Financial Times, to the Economist, what have you. It is impossible to read them. You feel that you're reading utter rubbish.
Well, I do keep it up because I do think it's important to be exposed, right? I don't want to be in a silo of my own.
But
what I
Utkarsh,
also
they keep
think-
writing the same things over and over again. You know their points. There's nothing new. You know
Yeah.
that. There's nothing
No,
new.
I certainly don't. I don't rely on them for the coverage of India. But then, knowing how they cover India, I treat everything else I read about other countries with a grain
A
of
pinch
salt.
of salt. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. 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 So now going to okay, let me ask you two very direct questions, right? Because these are the wonderful dinner party conversations of NRIs who love to who give an opinion on everything.
Don't
So,
say that.
to-
We are both NRIs, or at least I am. You're
Yeah, I am a
you're a
OCI.
Singaporean, but I am an
Yes.
NRI.
Yes. So let me give you two things. Question number one. Has India in the last 10 years gotten more unsafe for someone who's not Hindu? What is your point of view?
Rubbish.
Okay. Tell me more.
I don't know what more to tell you. This is a figment of somebody's overactive imagination. Certainly not. So if that was true, why is it that all the Rohingyas of the world want to come and settle in India? So you have Muslims from Bangladesh crossing everywhere. Why is it that so many people are rushing in? Look at the population of Assam rising. Look at the population of West Bengal rising. And so this is, you know that I do not know any very bad words, but everyone who's listening, whatever bad words you know, please use them. This is utter rubbish. And I don't know do you have any data to support this? Then I can
No, I have
counteract that
nothing.
data.
I'm just asking a very plain open question.
Okay. So
What
I
do
don't
know
know.
is that
I don't know what data is there to support this. I am not aware of any. In case anyone who is listening to this is aware of such data, please make it known and we will consider that data. In my understanding, this is just an opinion of people, many of whom have never even been to India.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opinion of the Western press for sure. Going back
And
to
they
the earlier
rely
conversation.
on some, comprador type self-hating English elite Indians to give their opinions.
Yeah.
They are worth nothing.
Yeah. No, you definitely see that strain amongst. It takes a certain kind of ingratiation. What's the word? I'm forgetting the word now.
Yeah, trying to ingratiate themselves with the
Ingratiate, right? That's the word.
Western,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
overlords. Yeah, so that you'll get another article in The
So,
Economist
so
and
I
get
think.
paid a little more.
Yeah. So it's kind of it's. I feel like the Western press, their Indian correspondents, sometimes self-selects for a person
Yeah,
of that particular
yeah,
disposition.
no
It's
doubts
very
about that.
obvious to a person who is actually Indian or
Yeah.
or from India. When they read it, it's pretty clear where this particular
And
person is coming
Utkarsh,
from.
India is not English. I am conducting, I mean, we are talking to each other in English, but how many people in India
Yeah.
actually speak English or know English? People if you count first, second, third, fourth, all languages, still it is less
Yeah.
than 5%. So
Yeah.
that means people who can barely write their name, you're counting even those. Still is barely
Yeah.
5%. So that leaves a huge 95%. And
Which honestly is a good thing actually.
yeah.
I've changed my mind on this. On one hand, at once I was of the opinion that all of India couldn't learn English fast enough in order to quote unquote get ahead in the world. But now I recognize a little bit of
Yeah.
the other burdens that come with a certain language, right? All the philosophical implications, everything that comes
And also, Utkarsh,
with
aren't
language.
we also, people who love science and scientific studies, don't they all tell us that we learn best in our mother tongues?
Yes. I mean, I'm the exception by far, but yes.
Well,
Yeah.
but who knows, if you and I have not learnt in my mother tongue either, English medium, and so are you. But who knows
Yeah.
how much more we may have learned, suppose we had learnt in our mother tongues. My husband has learnt in his mother tongue till 12th, and then he went to IIT Kanpur. But then he had to pay a huge, what can I say, price for that. Because in IIT Kanpur, everything was taught in English. So he had to spend a lot of time just translating. Whereas all his math and science till 12th was done in Hindi.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes.
Cannot imagine that. Wow.
Yeah.
Like IC or rather CBSE level. Interesting.
This is another very fruitful area of discussion. We've never picked this up as yet, but Indian languages, education in Indian languages, very important. It's very important. And I think the new education policy is now open to this idea, and a lot of, especially scientific works, STEM works, are being translated into Indian languages.
Yep.
What was
Good.
the
I
other
think
dinner party question? There was another dinner party question.
No, I think that it was linked to this, right? Which was that is secularism consistent with the idea of a Hindu majority that wants to reassert itself. But I think we kind of answered that, right? In the beginning.
Yeah,
It just
yeah,
struck me.
but there will be a few. This is not going to be a very smooth process, Utkarsh, because this is that Hindu majority which has been trampled upon for a good 1,000 years. So it's going to find its voice. It has started finding its voice. It's not going to be an easy task, both for it to find its own inner genius and also for other people to accept it. It's not going to be easy. And like I said, the Indian constitution, which is basically, we the people of India had given ourselves a, sovereign democratic republic. But the 42nd Amendment, which Indira Gandhi did during emergency, made it into a socialist secular, added those two words. It also completely, broke apart whatever system was there in the constitution, and kind of she gave herself and the central government a lot of powers. So the 43rd and 44th Amendment basically pulled all that back. But these two words, secular and socialist, have not yet been removed from the preamble. So this was done by Indira Gandhi unilaterally. In the Constituent Assembly, there was a discussion on this, and it was decided not to add the word secular. But the word secular was added during emergency by Indira Gandhi in her own very dictatorial kind of way. This question is being discussed in the Supreme Court as we speak. But in India, secularism is not a word which is understood like you understand it, simply because Hindus have borne the brunt of laws which are not secular. So for you, secular means it should be the same for all religions, right? But it's not so. You see, the various HRCE acts in the country. These are called Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Acts. These were first started by the British to take over temples which were very powerful and very rich. They gave it up because they found there was a lot of pushback. After 1947, the Indian state has gone all out to take over the temples of Hindus and only Hindus.
Why?
Religious. That's such a good question. Give me an answer. We have been looking for an answer. Is there any reason
Okay, what was
why
the justification?
So sometimes they'll say, no, it's very rich, we want to protect it. Sometimes they'll say, no, you are fighting with each other too much, therefore we will take it over. So all kinds of excuses are found. No, there was some embezzlement of funds, so we'll take it over. These reasons are all, most of the time, imaginary.
But why are these things particular to the Hindu faith? That would can apply to any religious
Yes. So,
Okay, that doesn't make sense to me.
Utkarsh,
I don't get it.
you come here with an open mind. Therefore, you are saying, yeah, why? Because if a mosque or a church is not to be controlled by the government of India, why is a temple to be controlled by the government of India or a
it should
state
be universal,
government?
right? It should be the same for everybody.
But it is
Either
not.
it can-
It is not,
Interesting,
and it is
okay.
one of the biggest ways in which the constitution and laws in India are anti-majority. They are anti-Hindu. Look at the RTE Act, the Right to Education Act. This says that in every school, there should be 20% reserved for people from lower economic status. But this is not applicable to Muslim schools or Christian schools, only to Hindu schools. Let me tell
I had
you,
no idea about
yeah,
this
so
sort
let
of
me tell you
double
all these
standard.
things. That is why Anand Ranganathan has written this very interesting book, Hindus in a Hindu Rashtra. People who are interested in this topic, please read it. These are the laws which militate against Hindus. Then you have that famous Act of 1991, which is the Religious Sites Act, the one which says that no religious place can change its character. It has to be what it was in 1947. Now, given the history of the Indian subcontinent, there are so many temples which have been taken over by Islamists and also in Goa by Christians. So far from giving them back as should be done, Hindus don't even have a right to go to the court. So it's against fundamental rights basically. If we feel that some of our religious rights have been trampled upon, can we go to the court and say, please look into it, sir? No. You don't even have the right to ask for justice. So if you feel that there is a sense of anger and resentment in the Hindu population, think about all these things, Utkarsh. Then look at the Waqf Act. What is a Waqf Act? It is that act which makes certain land or property, etc., into a Muslim trust. A Waqf is basically a Muslim religious trust. So this Waqf Act was first passed in 1954, which gave certain Muslim organizations the right to claim certain lands and create a Waqf. This was repealed, and in 1995 an even tougher one was passed where they could take over many properties. That was amended in 2013. Now basically, if you live somewhere and there is some Muslim organization near you, it can come, it can take over your land. It does not even need to tell you. One day suddenly they will come and say get out because we've given you enough notice and you didn't reply, so you get out. You know that you cannot even go to the court against this. The decision of the Waqf tribunal is final. You cannot approach even the High Court or the
This
Supreme
is
Court
very
against
strange
this.
sounding. Why particular for?
So this was done in
I mean,
2013, just before the UPA2 government was falling. The elections were on their head and they were obviously currying favor with Muslims. Utkarsh, the true story of the anti-Hindu laws in the constitution and in India are, I don't know,
I think-
appalling, and they are such travesties of justice. They have taken away the fundamental rights of Hindus. And that's all because, Hindus are fair game. Because Hindus and Hinduism, they are a backward, unequal religion and they have to be reformed to death. Other religions are all perfect. Hindus have to be reformed to death. There's another interesting thing going on at the moment, Uniform Civil Code.
Which we don't have.
which we don't have, and which is seen to be, if there's a uniform civil code, it is anti-Muslim. I don't know how people come to these conclusions. I just don't understand it. Uniform civil code, if at all, is meant generally, to look at the gender injustice within the religious laws of any religion, and to do something about it. So a lot has been done in terms of the Hindu Marriage Act and the Hindu Inheritance Act, etc., etc. Like I told you, Hinduism is the playground of social justice and reform. All other religions in India are perfect. They don't need any reform. So Utkarsh, if you feel the sense of resentment and anger from Hindus who are becoming aware of these things, it's true. But still look at the way in which Hindus operate. They are 80% of this land. They feel that the Ram Janmabhoomi was theirs. They feel that Mathura was theirs. But they feel that Kashi is theirs. But what's happening? There's a court-mandated resolution happening. So the sense of one is, of course, patience, which can be both plus and minus, and the fact that they are law-abiding citizens comes through very, very clearly in this. There are some such provocative things that I don't want to really mention them in this podcast related to the Kashi Shivling which has been found. But in spite of such things, we are still waiting patiently for the courts to go their own way. For the Ram Janmabhoomi issue to be resolved, it took 500 years. Now I wonder if Hindus have the patience to wait for another 500 years for Kashi and Mathura. And given the history of the violence and barbarity of the Islamic invasion, the destruction of temples, for which if anyone wants to read, Sitaram Goyal has a very comprehensive list in Hindu temples, what happened to them, volume 1 and volume 2, both available on Kindle also. Read that and see the list. No one has been able to rebut that list. No one. So there is certainly an awakening of Hindu thought. There is certainly, I want to say that, yes, this is the way I think as a Hindu. So this has not been allowed to me for the past, I don't know how many hundred years. In the last few Eurocentric centuries, certainly not. Post 1947, when Nehru took that very, very peculiar and Western-centric turn, definitely not. So today, if I say even simple things that I want justice, that is construed as a war cry. Because no one is used to it.
The whole Nehru thing, you know how it's coming across to me, and maybe it's a little bit of a crude analogy. It's coming across to me, and I'm using a very crude analogy, so maybe slightly provocative. As the analogy is that there's there is a slave in the master's house in a big bungalow. The slave is suddenly freed. He is just going out of his way to show that, hey, I can be like you.
Yes.
And guess what? I'm holding myself to such a high moral standard, even more than you hold yourself to, so that you can appreciate me. It's just irritating.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. He had that very deep kind of self-esteem issues with reference to Western civilization. Yeah, that's true. And you see, he was very powerful in 1947. So he did a lot of things which gave the country its direction for the next 60 years. So I think it was the Guardian which said in 2014 that India is finally free when UPA 2 was defeated. So when you have been used to trampling upon a good 1/6 of the world's population, and suddenly the trampled upon are sitting up and looking at you and saying, excuse me, why are you trampling us? And then you feel, how dare they object to me trampling on them? So, that's the kind of thing which is happening right now. And I still feel that given the kind of systematic injustice against Hindus in this constitution, there's still a lot of quiet patience and the desire to sort all this out slowly and amicably.
I think we definitely should do an episode, because I had no idea, right? Maybe I'm particularly uninformed. I don't know.
No, Utkarsh,
But
you are not
yeah,
ill-informed. All these things are unknown to the general public.
yeah. So we should probably do an episode on these anti-majoritarian laws in the
Yes.
and parts of the constitution.
Yeah, and their
Probably.
history, by how did they come to be what they were. Because I did want to say a lot more, but there's no time. Especially
Yeah.
the discussions on secularism, for example, in the Constituent Assembly. It's this, like, I'm sorry, it's like the bickering of children. All of them have so many different things to say. They can't agree with each other. And you know what they did when they couldn't agree? They would just put it in the directive principles of state policy, that they are there, but they are not law. So okay, if somebody wants to do it, they can do it. That's a cop out, if I ever heard one.
Yep.
Yeah,
Good. Should
so
we?
many things to
Yeah. Go ahead.
discuss. No. I was
Yes.
just saying that every time, Utkarsh, we say this at least 3-4 times. Oh, we must do this, we must do that. But then we are
But
a
we
very
keep a
young
list.
podcast.
Yes. We have a long way to go.
Yeah, we have a long way to go, and slowly, we'll be drilling in. These are I think, more comprehensive bird's eye view of things. And slowly, as time goes by, we will be drilling into these things and coming up with just, say, for example, only the HRCE acts. Why were Hindu temples taken over? And what is the situation today? So, things like that, the drill down will happen as we become an older podcast. And we have to first finish with the bird's eye view also.
Yes. Absolutely. Good. So shall we end it here?
Yes, absolutely. And I hope that,
Hopefully.
there's been food for thought for people.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's always, I think for me, the process is I get so much food for thought that I spend a week processing it.
And then
And
you
that's
get
been
some
going
more.
on now. And then I get some more. This has been happening since October, since we started this. Okay, wonderful. Again, folks, who thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. As we said, we will delve into some of these topics in more detail. Until then, please keep watching or listening. We appreciate your support a lot.
Please subscribe, please share.
Yes.
Yes, and please tell us what you feel. It's great to deal with or to read the comments that come in. It is wonderful. And everyone who WhatsApps me, please put it on the YouTube video too. It would be nice if everyone read your comments instead of just me. So thank you and see you next time. Namaskar.
All right. Take care. Take care.